We're now live on YouTube, Chairman.
Thank you, Jeanette. Right, we'll go for the meeting now. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and any members of the public who might be listening or who will listen in the future, and colleagues as well. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. It is incredibly hot, isn't it? Even in here, isn't it? My goodness. Perhaps I shouldn't have worn a suit tonight, but there we are. My name is Councillor Stephen Woodliff, and I am the chairman of this committee. My vice chairman is Councillor Anton Danny, to my right. Firstly, can I ask all of you, when you are speaking, that you please do so using the microphones carefully without getting too close to them. Yeah. In order that everyone may hear you clearly. Can you hear me, by the way? Or am I echoing around the room hopelessly? Thank you. Fine. Yes, okay. I must advise you that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. I will now ask committee members to introduce themselves, and also officers, please, actually. So if I go from my right, Councillor Anton Danny, will you introduce yourself, sir?
Councillor Anton Danny, I'm the Deputy Chairman of this committee.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Judith Skinner.
There we go. Tom Ashton, member of committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor David Brown.
I'm Councillor Alison Austin, a member of this committee. Thank you.
Councillor Alan Bell.
And officers too, perhaps.
I'm Pippa Rose, the Democratic Service Apprentice.
Yeah, evening everyone. Rob Barlow, Chief Executive.
Andy Fisher, Interim Deputy Chief Exec and Officer Support for the committee.
Thank you very much indeed. You also have other members joining us virtually tonight. The leader and deputy leader, that's Councillors Paul Skinner, leader, and Councillor Nigel Welton, deputy leader, who are here to answer any questions a member may have on the report. So welcome to you if you're here. I can't see. Are we here?
I think, Chairman, the leader is here and I haven't seen the deputy leader around.
Right, okay. Well, I assume that, I can't quite see from the screen here, but anyway, I assume that you're here. Also joining us virtually as observers are Councillor Jonathan Noble. Is Jonathan with us? Excellent. Hope you've got plenty of questions, Jonathan. With that smile, I'm sure he has 130. Now, the officers have introduced themselves, it's fine. And those attending virtually, this will be James Gilbert and Jeanette Collier. Is James Gilbert to hand?
Good evening, Chairman, I am.
Very much. And we've already met Jeanette Collier, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Judy Wellborn is present as well as an observer.
Right, thank you very much indeed, thank you. We will now move to part one of the agenda, the preliminaries, to receive apologies for absence and notice of substitutions, if any.
Thank you, Chairman. We have received apologies from Councillors Martin Howard, Frank Pickett and Yvonne Stevens.
Thank you very much, thank you. To receive any declarations of interest in respect of any item on this agenda. Does any member have any interest to declare? I take that as being no. So we move to part two of the agenda. So to read the information, that concludes the preliminary items, and we now move to part two of the agenda. The first item of business is a report on the South East Lincolnshire Councils Partnership, which starts on page 1 of the agenda, and our Chief Executive, Rob Barlow, will present it. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Brilliant. So first of all, thank you for placing this on the agenda at short notice tonight. I think most of you would have been at the recent member briefing that we had on this topic, but not everybody. So it may be helpful tonight if I take a gallop through the 14 slides of the business case, just to give it some context. But apologies for those that have heard a lot of this before. You also have the full document, which goes into a fair amount more detail, which I'll gladly just touch on, so you're aware of what's in the publication, and then just touch on the annual governance statement. I should apologise because there's quite a lot for me to speak of and get over. It is a business case though, so it may not be the most enlightening and exciting of documents. So if I have your indulgence on that, that would be appreciated. And then if I do that as quickly as I can, Chairman, then there'll be lots of time for members to ask questions, if that's okay.
Fine with me.
Okay, so very quickly, we had a member briefing last week with Boston members. I've last night undertaken a briefing with South Holland's members, and I've got one tomorrow with East Lindsey's members. We've also have a joint scrutiny process tomorrow, which I know some of you will be involved in. So there's quite a lot of activity going on at the moment to make sure everybody is fully briefed. The intention is that at the end of this week, we should have been able to pick up comments, observations from all those member forums, with the opportunity for including them into the report that then goes on to council. So that's kind of the time frame that we're looking at. I'm conscious again that it will be difficult to read anything on the screen. So it's nice to see people have got the paper copies, which I'll try my very best to talk us through. So we've included an introduction which really draws the reader into the document. There are several things here that I think are worth just spending some time on. We refer to this as being the largest council partnership in the country, and I think that is important to recognise. This is something that rarely happens in local government. It's difficult to achieve. So to have 3 councils supportive of a similar and aligned arrangement is something that if it's agreed, I think there'll be a great deal of pride and national interest in. We touch on the kind of things that the scale should help us to address. I know from the briefing last week, members were fully aware of the educational challenges and the skills challenges that we have across the east coast of Lincolnshire. And I've been in previous briefings with many of you looking at health, transport, all those factors that we group up to say, you know, we have some deprived parts of our community. There was also a letter that we received last week from the Secretary of State confirming the government's intentions on devolution and whether unitarisation or reorganisation may form part of that. So I'd suggest that the work we're doing at the moment puts us in a strong position if anybody were to ask Lincolnshire to look again at structural reform or explore the opportunity for taking on devolved powers. So I think that sets a nice context. We've then got a number of slides which look at the partnership opportunity. So I'll just go through these very quickly. 3 councils with a single workforce, the ability to influence locally and nationally, because I think most councillors I've spoken to consider that the East Coast has had a poor deal over the years in terms of the funding that's been directed to it, and it's perhaps been left behind. There's also the efficiency element, which is very much about recognising that the country is likely to be in a challenging situation post the pandemic financially. And we've estimated that if everything were to be aligned, which clearly it won't, but the maximum scale of the opportunity approaches a sum over 10 years of just over £40 million, which shouldn't be a surprise because they are the types of numbers that unitarisation would deliver. So it should be a similar target. We then go on to talk about some of the successful partnerships that the 3 councils already have. We've got PSPS, which is really important actually because that standardised ICT platform will make everything else that much more straightforward. We reference East Lindsey's Leisure and Cultural Trust, South Holland have got some housing companies, which may be of interest to the other partners. And there's also a history of working with the other councils anyway, be it on drainage board liaison, local planning policy between Boston and South Holland. And each council is aligned in terms of its CCTV service that Boston hosts. So there's quite a lot of overlap already. There's then a little bit about the opportunity for staff. We do lose staff from time to time because they have to go and further their careers elsewhere. Boston is one of the smallest councils, so whilst there's lots that we do, people who are very ambitious do often look further afield, and I'd suggest that 1,000 employee structure and the opportunity for people to develop will be improved if this opportunity was supported. Over on to slide 4. We talk about the capacity to the democratic leadership. I mean, that's basically another way of saying that you as councillors have a greater resource to get things done. We were looking at 1,000 employees across the 3 patches. And I think we've already noticed in the 2 council relationship that we now have some officers who focus on bringing money in. We have officers who are focused on tackling climate change. And I think that can advance even further, because there are often things that councils on their own have found difficult to have that expertise in. In terms of partnership of place, we do liaise already very well with government departments, with county council colleagues, with the Environment Agency, but it tends to be 7 distinct councils in Lincolnshire having 7 conversations. There's the opportunity through this way of working to look at it from a regional perspective, to have more influence over how we work with other partners, and hopefully make their working relationship with us better. We then talk about places. I think it's really keen that all councils will need that assurance that if we are to scale up, we don't lose a sense of what's important to each place. And there's quite a bit in the appendices, which I'll touch on in a bit, to give you that comfort, where we've tried to recognise what's important to each council and not lose sight of that. So I'll touch on that in a moment. But we talk about some of the opportunities there around a regional approach to culture, health, well-being, housing development. So it's about scaling up. And then the final point is about being stronger to tackle what will be thrown at us nationally. So I've mentioned the devolution, local government reorganisation, but we're also likely to enter in the next few years to the biggest change to our waste collection services that we've ever encountered, and that will be a big challenge, because that change will cost money. So I think again, having that voice and shared response to that is something probably quite important. So moving on to slide 5, a very simple slide in terms of just defining the geographical area. You've got 3 coastal districts in Lincolnshire neatly sat on top of each other as a very distinct area. We've got a population of just over 300,000, which is often referred to as the minimum for a unitary council. And I suspect that figure will increase following the latest census and the big push for settled status that we've seen, particularly in South Holland and Boston. The geography is very large, over 1,000 square miles. That would be one of the biggest administrative areas in England collectively. The staffing numbers I've mentioned, and the 3 sets of 122 elected members. So just as a rehearsal over the page, on page 6, we've put down the reasons that support this business case, and it's really about the geography. I think most people would see the strategic alliance between East Lindsey and Boston already delivering. We've got the underlying relationship with PSPS. All 3 councils have been viewed by their auditors, have been financially sound, and have all got quite a good track record of being quite innovative when they've needed to be. We've got the financial opportunity that I touched on a moment ago. We've got the shared challenges around employment skills, training, flood defence, etc. We have the ability to engage with the private sector as a region to try and to draw them in and invest. And again, places like the Port of Boston doesn't just benefit and have meaning to Boston, it has benefit and meaning to South Holland, to East Lindsey. It's that view, I think, that we're promoting. Bringing in the extra money, and we've already got a really recent good track record in things like Towns Fund, which we should all be really proud of. The staff that we've mentioned before. So that's all very within our grasp. And then we just also talk about positioning ourselves for the future. I won't rehearse the local government devolution agenda again, but there's also a suggestion there that maybe a fourth council at some point as we step forward. So in terms of the strategic ambition, again, I won't go through the detail on that, but it is about that regional voice. But the important point is each council retains its individual sovereignty. So your decision making doesn't change through this. It just provides more opportunities, which I think is quite a nice way to view it. Over on page 8, we touch a little bit more about staffing. There's probably not a great deal more to say on that, but I think if we are to advertise roles following a decision, I think the interest in what we're able to offer people in terms of the opportunity will draw more candidates than we've ever experienced. I think what we're doing will put us on a national scale. So on slide 9, we've got the stages for building the partnership. And my advice to the leaders so far is don't plan to do too much through to April next year. I think we've been through a really difficult time with the pandemic. This would be the second big partnership in 12 months. And we also have to recognise that South Holland have just come out of a partnership with their colleagues in Norfolk. So I think there's a bit about having time to breathe, putting some of the fundamentals in place around culture, making sure the staffing structure is correct, looking at our performance expectations and seeing if there are any quick wins. And then I think we've got the opportunity to move into a 3-phase programme, which probably must not lose sight of the economic COVID recovery, the cross-political discussions, because this only works if the three sets of politicians are speaking to each other. That's where the opportunities and for delivery come about. And that will take time for everybody to get familiar, I think. The second phase is then about new ways of working with partners. It's about a transformation programme. It's about how we align some of our services for betterment. And then the third phase is, I think, once everything is kind of working well, you've got the opportunity to look at a really ambitious agenda around those devolved powers discussions. So it summarises, phase 1 is setting it up, phase 2 is accelerating, and then phase 3 is embedding it. We've then got on slide 10 a summary of the savings that we've modelled based on 6.5%, and that is of controllable spend in each organisation. And that in its totality comes to the £42 million. And the model that we would seek to deliver those savings is the same as what we've been delivering between Boston and East Lindsey. So again, there should be a degree of comfort that the model and approach is one that's tried and tested. We then on slide 11 come on to the senior management structure. And I'll just run through that very briefly. We've got in effect 4 strands, one which is around the community. So we have areas like wellbeing, community leadership, regulatory services, leisure and culture, and the neighbourhoods, the waste collection. So it's all the very service-based things that are very close to people. And again, it's quite normal for a council to have that in its structure. The second bit is around the corporate arm. So it's really about making sure we do things right. And again, governance is going to have to be really strong across 3 councils. The oddity in there is what's called the HRA. So that's the housing revenue account that South Holland have. But again, it's in there because it does require a significant amount of regulatory control and governance. We've then got the growth area. And again, that will be, I think, working on areas such as the Towns Fund, levelling up funding, all the opportunities to bring business and funding into the 3 councils. And we're also suggesting that planning should go in there because planning is a key enabler for supporting economic growth. It will be the planning policies and how they're presented and sold and the engagement with developers that will support a lot of that economic growth work. And again, that's more common than not these days for councils to see those 2 areas being aligned. And then the one area that's extra, and I think this is the added value that we get as a 3-way partnership, is having a delivery team. So it's all very well being awarded copious amounts of money for Towns Fund projects, but you actually need somebody to deliver them. So we've suggested that we have part of the council's shared management team, which is around delivery, and actually obtaining money for a project and then being able to actually manage and survey and use architectural services and contract management are completely different skills. And again, that's why we think that's wholly important. Over the page, on page 12, there's just a very quick summary about the cost of the management structure. So the 3 councils employ just over 21 senior managers at the moment, which costs 1.75 million. The proposal is that we drop that by just over 3 staff to 18, which comes in at 1.4 million. But I should point out as well, most, if not all of that saving goes to South Holland District Council. And the logic behind that is whilst we're apportioning based on population, East Lindsey and Boston already took their management savings out 12 months ago when we were the 2 partners. So this is about bringing a 3rd partner in on the same basis. Slide 13 is very much about the legal framework that allows us to work together to share costs, to share savings. And an important point at the bottom there, that the Borough Council's current staff and current number of staff will always remain. So if a vacancy occurs in a Boston employed post, we would recruit a new person on Boston's terms and conditions. And that just means that each council maintains its workforce throughout the partnership. And again, I think it's very sensible. And then just very quickly over the page, on page 14, we just map out in very simple terms the process that I outlined earlier and some suggested dates on when we could look to go live. So Chairman, that's a quick trot through there. We could either pause for questions or I could go through the more detailed sections of the appendices.
Well, I'll ask members what they want to do. Do you want to have some questions? Is that correct? Yes. We'll go for questions, if that's right. So
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask Mr. Barlow, you mentioned that planning would become more of an issue between the partnerships, etc. I mean, we already work with South Holland on the South East Lincolnshire local plan. So would that run side by side with that, or would it be incorporated in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. One thing we've tried to do is not paint a picture at the moment of what it would look like, because I think there's the opportunity for the planning chairs, the planning portfolio holders to get together and decide what it is they want. I'm conscious there are 1 or 2 service areas where actually knowing a lot more about your place, and planning is a really good example, is probably an important consideration. So whilst we don't know who will fill the role, but let's assume it was a Mike Gildersleeve, who you'll all be familiar with. One of Mike's early discussions, I think, with members is how much do you see benefit in joining up, and how much do you feel benefit in keeping separate? And I think we'll have to do that for lots of areas.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
Thank you. I'm really glad to see the symmetry between planning and economic development that has already there's already the framework of that within the current alliance between East Lindsey and Boston, but I think there is a huge scope for opportunity here. Being able to speak, as I think you've already mentioned, with that one voice along the East Coast, and trying and so that the local plans of Boston, South Holland and Selp and East Lindsey's local plan, that they tie together to support wherever there are shared economic development goals, because we're familiar with the boundaries of Boston, but people living the other side of the boundary of the Boston Borough, which are less than 3 miles from where we're sitting, don't necessarily see that same barrier. So tying that across those two areas and speaking with one voice, I think makes an awful lot of sense. I'm very grateful for the briefings that I get as a county councillor from, as to other, I mean, I'm not Boston area county, but it's near enough to Boston that it seems to count. The briefings that we get as county councillors on what the borough council is looking at doing, and to keep us on the same page. And the common theme through all of that is we do ask for our fair share on the eastern half of Lincolnshire, and it doesn't always feel like we're getting it. So I'd like to think that the weight of 3 councils working together across these 2 important areas may go some way towards addressing that.
Rob, do you want to answer that? Do you want to have any comment on it?
I agree with everything Councillor Ashton's said, really. I think it's important the business case doesn't preclude anything. And the idea is to put you as members in control of the process, because, you know, I think if we define too much too soon, you know, it puts people off. And I think because we're doing something that's rather brave and unique, I think people have got to feel assured throughout the process. So I'm sure we can do all of that.
Yes, I mean, I agree. I think ownership is it's a key factor here. I agree with everything you've said, by the way, about planning. It's a key matter. Councillor Alison Austin, I'm told. Yes, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
My comments, they're comments more than questions. Is that okay at this stage?
You do anything you like, Alison.
Don't I ever?
I know. That's why I said it.
Well, you've known me a long time. Right. My first comment was obviously Boston is on a different scale from both East Lindsey and South Holland. But I'm very much in favour of this, but of course I like to play devil's advocate sometime. The only thing that slightly puts me not fully at ease is this potential of having a 4th council, because Boston, I wouldn't want Boston to lose its identity. And if we were taking on a 4th council, well, to be honest, there's not that many options, are there? It could be the one right up the top, but that's not all that likely when there's the 2 unitaries up there. There's the one at the very bottom. And of course, there's the nearest one if you set out going towards Lincoln. And they are all much bigger, well, certainly the 2 Kestevens, I would say, seem to have more money to play with, but of course they have more people. So I wouldn't want to see us lose our identity if we move to 4 councils. Just picking up on the fact of South Holland's divorce from Breckland, calling it divorce, was there any particular reason other than the fact that really Reckland looks towards the rest of Norfolk rather than, and of course, it's not only different counties, but of course, it's different regions, isn't it? Because we're East Midlands, and I don't think Norfolk is it?
That's correct, Councillor Austin. I mean, the partnership South Holland had with Breckland lasted 10 years. And I think both councils coming out of it agreed to do so with mutual agreement and did it very amicably. The reason for ending it is because I think they realised that we were heading into a period of devolution, local government reorganisation, and having that, as you've just described, that cross-border, different county, East Midlands as opposed to East of England, was seen as a difficulty that might not help their future direction. So they've done it very intentionally. So they've got the opportunity to create a partnership in Lincolnshire, because that's where they feel they need to be for the next stage of what might come.
May I just come back slightly, Chairman? I forget now, not sure whether it was in the previous 4 years at LCC, but whether it was before that, but I was we were looking then at unitary, interestingly, and we very rapidly, and that was I'm just a nobody there, and we
That's
were
hardly correct, is it, Councillor Austin? You're hardly a nobody at County Hall.
Well,
seems you're going to be vice chairman.
I was then. Let's put it like that.
Oh, well,
And
not now,
but
are
the
you?
point is, we rapidly realised that Lincolnshire as a whole, Greater Lincolnshire, was certainly too big to be a single unitary authority. And before we got diverted then onto the elected mayors and so on, which was a sort of later issue, we were it seemed sensible to be making that eastern coastal coming together. So I very much agree that we are really poised for the start of a race, aren't we? We're going to be off the starting blocks, as whatever is thrown at us by central government.
Yeah, just to come back on Councillor Austin's comments, I mean, even if nothing happens, I think it puts us in a stronger negotiating position. And the latest letter from the Secretary of State doesn't make it absolutely clear on what the future will look like. It may be that what we're looking to do at the moment provides an alternative. I'm sure the local government association will be interested in us as a test area, as it were. So I think it just opens up more options for the county and districts.
Have you completed your questions? You happy? Good, all right. Councillor Judith Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to thank the officers for preparing such a comprehensive document. It's really informative. And again, mine are a bit more comments rather than questions. I'd like to point out that I see it as whilst we don't gain in monetary value by adding South Hollanders, we do gain resilience, which I think is very important. And I see it as expanding our capacity to get ahead of the game with bids for funding that some of the big authorities down south have the ability to do. They have teams that have got projects to go when funding arrives, whereas Boston has always struggled to do that through manpower. I see that the expansion as enabling all three councils to be in a position to grab that money when it comes up. Thank you.
Do we come back to that?
Just quickly, Chairman, it's fair to say that we're not given very much money these days, but we are provided a lot of opportunity to compete for it. So I'd share that comment that the better we are at competing, the more we're likely to get.
I think that's true. Yes, Tom Ashton. Yes, Councillor Tom Ashton, please
Thank
come
you.
back.
Apologies. This is again
No,
more
no.
in the vein of comment rather than question.
That's fine.
But again, to welcome the opportunity that this appears to bring in allowing officers to specialise in their field rather than doubling up. And I mean, I say this in absolutely no comment on any individual, simply the very concept of even within the current Boston East Lindsey arrangements, combining crucial economic development stuff with other roles such as monitoring officer and so on. Because with the best will in the world, whoever's doing those kind of roles, if you're halfway through landing attracting important new businesses to the area, the last thing you want to have to do is to break off from that to deal with a squabbling parish council. So actually just having that, and I can see that in the structure, that allows that degree of concentration and specialism. And it's an area where Boston has done, as a council, has done really, really well for pre-alliance days of having one officer doing a number of different roles, which are more often than not going to have to have filled when people have left and haven't been replaced. But it just, I think this allows the expertise where it needs to go to. And I genuinely welcome it. I share also Councillor Austin's concerns about a fourth council, heaven forfend. What we have on the table at the moment appears to me to have symmetry and equality. It has geographical symmetry, it has political symmetry, it has economic symmetry. And the politics of it aligns in a genuinely beautiful way. And I fear that adding something on either end of it would have the potential to unbalance it. I mean, the hypotheticals there would be a Grimsby or a Grantham, which would have which feels like it would knock the whole thing off of kilter, simply by introducing economies and geography that doesn't necessarily fit with that East Coast. And the final thing that I circled on here, no, simply along those lines, is to welcome. No, I'm about to repeat myself. I circled the same thing twice, but no, I'll leave that there. I think that's effective, Michael. Thank you.
That's fine. You can always come back again. Do you want to comment, Rob?
Yeah, just to say, Chairman, I mean, I think that comment is in there as an ambitious statement, but let's be absolutely frank about it. We're moving at pace. We've got a few years of a really big program to get this landed. So I think any thoughts or decisions around that are probably some time into the future. So.
Okay. You want to come back?
Apologies. I have just deciphered one of the things that I squiggled on here. Is simply to say that I welcome the steady pace at which we're proceeding. I think yes. I know other members had concerns about the pressure that it puts on existing workforces going through this level and pace of change. So I'm genuinely welcome that we're recognising that in taking things steady and moving to the pace at which the councils and employees are able to keep up with. So I think that's a step in the, I think that's a genuinely positive step.
Now I'd like to go to Councillor Bell, but Jeanette, do you have a comment? Can't hear you.
Sorry, she's just trying to say that Jonathan Noble is indicating to speak.
Pardon?
She's just trying to let you know that Jonathan Noble is.
Jonathan Noble. I think we'll go to Councillor Bell first, actually.
Yeah.
I think otherwise we'll be here. No, I'm not saying. Councillor Bell, please. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to go to the financial implications. It just says, whilst precise financial details will only be known as and when individual detailed business plans are developed, the overall savings partnership is expected to be around 26 million over 10 years. Boston's share is expected to be 5 or 6. It's pure conjecture, really. We're looking at things, and basically, when I look what we did with East Lindsey, it's hoping. And I'm not one of those people that have got much hope at the moment. I'm really concerned about this. I really am. But it is pure conjecture.
I agree, but then what else can we do? We have to work with what we've got, don't we? The situation as it is, but we're right when you say that the economic situation is very precarious. So we cannot say what will happen even in 12 months' time, but we have to work with our projections, don't we? That's all we can do. We have to work with something. Am I out of line, Rob? No?
Not at all. I mean, there's probably several ways to look at this. And I think when we go into the more detailed appendices, we have mapped out the budget gap for each council, so you could see what contribution this type of thing would make. We've got the year's experience of being able to prove that by using our staff together saves money. That's delivered, so we know it works. I think that where Councillor Bell's correct is we don't save very much at all if members don't agree to do things together. But clearly you've got to come together in order to be able to do things. So I think there is an order, but like you, there is an element which is a leap of faith for some people because it requires the political and officer mechanics to make things work. What I can say is I can't see that we're going to be worse off. So we've got nothing to lose. That's probably a saving grace, is a way of putting it.
You're very optimistic.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rob.
Jeanette, we'll invite Councillor Noble now to join us.
Thank you, Chairman.
Jonathan, you there?
I am. Can you see me? Because someone's stopped my video earlier. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes. First thing, I would ask Rob if he stands by the following statements that he made about a week ago at the Jakeman's Community Stadium about the possible expansion of the Strategic Alliance. Firstly, as regards savings, as are shown on slide 10, these are the maximum of what is possible. The targets in the Memorandum of Understanding are based on 6.5%. The current target prior to this was 5%. Savings are not on the same scale as ELDC, BBC Strategic Alliance. They are more modest. Financial savings not as great as potential resilience. So I just want to ask Rob, does he stand by all those comments he made a week ago?
Councillor Noble, I'm not entirely sure I understand your question, but anything I said a week ago at the Jakeman Stadium was most certainly correct.
Okay. To summarise, you were saying that the savings that would allegedly be achieved would not be as great as the savings we'd made already between ELDC and BBC. Okay, yeah, one or two comments really. I'm very, very concerned about the bureaucracy and the potential expansion of the bureaucracy. Now, we know that at the moment, the costs for Boston and ELDC are 978,700. With incorporation of South Holland District Council, that goes up to 1,421,000. So there's a £442,700 increase in the cost of the bureaucracy, albeit it's going to be shared between three councils. Also, the savings that accrue the 333,000 go to South Holland District Council. That's why I've said in the past that it might be expedient or good idea, given that South Holland are so desperate to join the alliance, that perhaps they should make some financial contribution. I can see the bureaucracy increasing, not decreasing. And if I can go back to the generic letter, one of the things they say is this: we expect deals to include significant reform proposals, including ways to achieve greater financial efficiency and administrative streamlining. I think we're going to get the worst, the opposite of that. Then moving on to the alleged savings, the budget gaps. If we look at the budget gaps, they are, for the three councils, by far the biggest for South Holland District Council in the next 3 years. If we go to slide 10 and we look at the cumulative financial opportunity, we'll see that the opportunities are more beneficial for ELDC than South Holland District Council. And if we look at the big bureaucracies in this country in a greater scale, things like the NHS and the BBC, they are massively inefficient. So I'm really concerned about, and as Councillor Bell said, a lot of these figures that we're given, they're highly speculative. We don't know yet what kind of central government monies will be forthcoming to us and our fellow councils in the next 2 or 3 years. We're awaiting a fair funding review. So I am very sceptical about the amount of savings that are going to be allegedly shown. And I'm very concerned that we're going to have a large unwieldy bureaucracy where senior managers are already struggling, and you're just going to have that on a bigger scale. So in summary, I'm very sceptical, especially about figures. Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Councillor Noble, rather. Rob, do you want to come back on that and make any comments?
Only to say that the business case is a draft document. So if there's anything Councillor Noble would like to see in it to alleviate his concerns, we have the opportunity to build them in before it goes to council.
Right, thank you, Rob. Councillor Noble, is there anything else you want to comment on? Jonathan?
Yes, I was muted, sorry. Possibly later on at the moment. Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. Appreciate it.
Right, okay. Yes, Councillor Anton Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we go to page 5, and I think we talk about our strategic ambition, and when we talk about a workforce of 1,000 staff working in partnership, it raises a little bit of concerns for me, because if we do an average salary of £25,000 per annum for each employee, we're talking about £25 million a year, which is our share probably 23%, if I'm not mistaken, will be around 5.8. I don't see, because I don't see the savings where they're going to come from, because I think our budget will go higher, because we're talking about the next 10 years to save 26 million, which is Boston will get around 6 million out of that. That's one thing. If we go to page 12, at the moment, page 12, it states the savings. We talk about the cost proposed shared management structure. At the moment, Boston is 326,922, East Lindsey 653, and the beneficial of all of these will be East Lindsey, because they're going to save around £330,000. So really, the strategic, if we, the partnership will work for probably South Holland at the moment, because they're going to save a lot of money. For us, and probably East Lindsey is not that much money we're saving. So just my concerns financially, if we talk about 1,000 staff power, I don't know where we're going to save the money, and what effect will it be? Will Boston will be having in the future, because we're talking about almost 6 million increase in salaries, which is we never pay that. If I can probably get Rob to answer if he may, or yep. Jonathan, if he's listening, he can answer that, please. Thank you.
Right, Rob, please, if you want.
Yeah, sure. Again, it's a good question. First of all, the three councils collectively spend £36 million a year on their staff. So there's a big old number there to take an interest in. It's really interesting to think as well about how we view savings, because often it's described as you have fewer staff. The strategic alliance so far between Boston and East Lindsey has got more staff than it had when it started. And that's because we've been at the table to bring money in when it's been made available. So that I think that old fashioned way of looking at salami slicing services to save money is, most authorities are either efficient or under-resourced to start with. So it's really about what extra value you give. In terms of some practical examples, if you go back 2 years, a lady called Anna Graves, who is a chief exec at South Holland, Phil Drury, who you all know in his days at Boston, and myself picking up the role at East Lindsey, would have each gone to the same chief executive meeting, and we would have each sat there for 2-3 hours and spoken on exactly the same things. The opportunity that we have here is for one person to do that, and therefore that frees up the resource to have another bin man or whatever function it is that we think we need to invest in. So that scale of opportunity in terms of how we structure our workforce, it might not jump out at people as an efficiency saving, but actually it's huge. If, for example, I'll take another example, we spoke about planning policy earlier. Each council's got to renew its local plan. There'll be key pieces of work in terms of planning policy that an individual officer may have that expertise in. It may be that we've got a comms strategy that needs doing on an issue that affects all three areas. We've only got to do it once rather than 3 times. So it's really about buying into that efficient way of using the resources we've already got, and it means we can do more. So the financial savings are in there, and if it was a case of saving cash constantly, we've demonstrated that we've got controllable spend that we could address. But actually, for me, the financial side of this decision is probably not the most important. It's about the resilience that I think was mentioned earlier. It's about the ability to do more. The public are hungry for wanting better services, more timely services. We've had quite a lot of feedback in terms of areas like waste collection over recent months. The only way I could see us finding the resource to support and feed that is by using our workforce better. And some of it is about fewer people at the top and more people at the bottom. So that's probably an answer that might help with that.
If I may come in, Rob, you're going to be on the top. And I will wish you all the best and good luck. You're trying your best. You will need more support from your, deputies. Basically, we're going to have more deputies then. So it doesn't, even if we save, probably with having one CEO at the moment, probably saving £200,000, we're going to spread it. Probably we may pay more for having more deputies under you, so you can get on with the jobs you want to do. So is that the case? You will need more support.
Again, there's elements of detail that we're diving into here, but we spoke earlier about the Environment Bill. Again, looking back of how we were established before the existing partnership and the proposed one, there would have been an officer in each council writing a separate report on how to respond to the Environment Bill. One officer can do that for the 3 councils. So there'll be lots of changes, and there may be things that, I would need more support on, but there's also lots of efficiencies that means that I can do more for the council. So it's really about viewing things in a completely different way. We've got Mr. Fisher with us tonight, who first and foremost looks after the council's assets, but he will also look after the running of a caravan park at the moment, or a company that one of the councils is operating. And it's a great example of an officer who really wants probably to focus on looking after the council assets, who's getting dragged into doing other things. And that again applies across our workforce. But keep coming back to this point, really, it will be for you as members to decide how you want to structure and deliver things in a different way. So you'll have your finger on controlling the costs, the size of the workforce, and what you expect to be delivered. It's putting the opportunity at your fingertips. Okay.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
The other question I would like to ask you, probably asked you before, Rob, is how resilient will the 3 of these 3 councils be to the devolution? Are we going to be protected firmly from the devolution, or we can fail probably and then the devolution will take over? Thank you.
The devolution opportunity will go one of 2 ways, I think. I think government will ultimately say, this is what you must do if you want anything. And that could be the abolition of Boston Borough Council and the County Council and a complete change. Alternatively, they may ask the question, how do you think local authorities should be structured in Lincolnshire to deliver the best outcomes for their community? And that will then gives us an opportunity to create and shape what it would look like. I don't know the answer to that one at the moment, Councillor, and I think that's what's making people uncertain. It's not clear.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Alice Austin. Oh, the leader wants to come in. On?
His hand is on the screen.
I can't see that. Okay, it's Councillor. Oh, yes. All right. Councillor Paul Skinner, are you there?
I certainly am, Chairman. Lots of words being mentioned. Some, I'll start my video. I'm not sure it would be better or worse for you. There's lots of words being mentioned. You know, caution. Yeah, I can feel with that. But during the life of the Alliance, which has been really good for us, we've had the capacity. This council and East Lindsey, we put in significant amounts of money and match funding. The sort of numbers we're talking about haven't been done in Boston or East Lindsey for many a year. And the Alliance has brought a capacity which we just wouldn't have had. So that's really good. So the opportunity is absolutely key to this. Partnerships, business or whatever, councils, the way you get the bigger bang for your buck is working in partnerships. Partnerships, there's no I in team, and you have to work really hard with it. And there was a question about working with other leaders. Well, actually, over this last 18 months, been working very closely with all the leaders in Lincolnshire, because there's been this little thing called COVID going on, and we've all had to work extremely hard as a team to deliver for our wards. If you want to go back to the old ways of practice, cut, eventually you get to a stage where the whole thing falls over. And this won't fall over because it's got legs. We can't actually predict what Robert Jenrick's going to do, but we can provide resilience for our area, which this relationship will do. We work with both partners on quite a few things already, so there's no change. There shouldn't be a problem with trust. And as Rob will also mention, waste, environment, national infrastructure, maybe now we'll get a chance to shape, whereas we've always been at the end of the queue. Now, working together, we all maybe get a little bit further up the queue. That's all I've got to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Paul Skinner. You can probably come back later on if you want to. Rob, do you want to make a comment on anything that's been said? No? Right, Councillor Alison Austin.
Thank you. Good thing I've not forgotten what it was going to be. Someone can, it might have been the Vice Chairman, I forget. Someone anyway commented on the size of workforce that the Joint Chief Exec would have to manage. But of course, that's to a certain extent what your next layer in that management structure is there for. But I see the fact that we could be much more ambitious because we have access to it's a bigger workforce, but it's access to individuals who have possibly more expertise, greater expertise in areas that we don't currently have that right person. It's not that our people are inferior, but because there's a larger workforce, then you've got that greater pool of expertise, and that's what I see as a plus.
Right, yes. Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just give an example of what Councillor Austin's mentioned there. We know that South Holland District Council have a housing revenue account. There's around 4,000 properties, and they have to manage those. They deal with the tenancies. So if Boston Borough Council or East Lindsey District Council wanted to get back to building houses, be it on a small scale or large scale, that takes a great length of time to get from having an idea to being anywhere near to getting a spade in the ground. But with a partner who is currently building houses and letting and managing houses, there must be a case for considering that would enable that to happen more quickly and more easily. And South Holland do that because they've got staff who have got that expertise that we don't currently have. So I think that's a really good point that's been raised.
Okay. Anybody else wish to make a further comment before we perhaps move on? The only thing I'd say is that we're talking about assets. It's really the skills of our staff. That's our greatest asset. The buildings and properties are not the real asset. Although it's an interesting building, it's the skills and talents of our officers that really matter. We hope obviously that in this larger workforce that there will be the specialized skills that we want, but we may well find that although we have many people, we don't necessarily have all the skills that we need, and we'll have to bring people in from outside if necessary who have those special skills that we need. So I think as a larger authority, have more chance of attracting the right people. But anyway, that's just a minor comment. Yes. Yes, of course. Here, Andy, a chance.
Can you tell us what's the value of our assets in Boston and what's the income?
I can tell you.
Can you, sorry, can I repeat because
Please,
Councillor
yes.
Austin doesn't hear properly. So, can you please tell us what's the value of our assets and what's our income from the assets for Boston? Thank you. Mr. Fisher.
Off the top of my head, I can tell you that our total asset value is in the region of £36 million. I can't remember the total income figure, but I'll find that out for you, Councillor, and send that out.
You're a more important asset than the buildings. It's your skills and talents, which are of great value to us. Now, Rob, if I could suggest that you carry on and with your exposition on the work.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We now move on to the appendices to the document, which, unless you want me to, I won't labour page by page. But if I go through and just pull out some of the key points, just to give you some confidence in terms of the work that's been done to support the summary pages that we went through. So the first section is about section 1, ambitions and priorities. Now, in terms of this section, we cover off some of the information that was in the previous report to Council. So slide 19, you can see that we speak of the deprivation indices, and it's interesting there that out of, I think, 300 plus local authority areas in that first table, you can see Boston is the lowest in terms of education, skills and training outputs. South Holland is 9th and East Lindsey 28. So they're all really, really low performers in that area. And that table just shows the consistency in not every area, but many areas.
Sorry for interrupting, Chairman, but
Sorry?
I just wondered if we could share the screen again so that those viewing on YouTube would be able to see the slides. If possible, if not, it was just a comment.
I think we can do that, Chair. So, yeah.
As you choose. As you choose.
So that just for my colleagues' benefit, I think that was on slide 19. So if we go over the page to slide 20, it touches on each of those areas of focus and deprivation, about what we may seek to do as a partnership to make a difference in those areas. And again, I won't go through all of those, but it's there to provide some confidence that we can make a difference together and what those things might be. That runs through over 3 pages through to slide 22. And then we then move on to slide 23, where we actually focus on the deprivation statistics for the 3 areas. There's quite a few of those slides, and again, it's information that you would have had access to in the first committee report. But it's all about building that common purpose common ambition around tackling some of those. I think it's very easy for a local authority to focus on its own on what are quite localized issues without necessarily having that picture of the region and how it's a common issue for that you know, if we want to have a conversation with our NHS or education provider colleagues, let's do it together, because it applies equally to all of us. Then on page 29, we talk about the corporate priorities of the councils. So again, we often focus on how we're different, but actually when you look at the corporate priorities, you'll see most of what we do is demonstrating that we're actually very similar. So we use different words, but we've got a you know, a housing similarity as a priority. We've got health as a priority. We've got environment as a combined priority, and they run all the way through. I think as we go through these slides through to slide 34, and we go on to also articulate what we mean by those priorities. So if you go through to slide 34, you take Boston, you've got Townsland, you've got empowering healthier communities, you've got the CCTV partnership. Under employment, you've got the Port of Boston work. So you can see that everything that we've spoken about in terms of priorities and ambition has got local meaning. Section 2, again, you'll recognise the first slide on 36 around building the partnership, but we then go into a little more detail about what some of the baseline principles are for getting the partnership up and running. Section 3 is what we call enablers and opportunities. This is where we get into a little bit more detail. So we talk about PSPS being an opportunity for each council on slide 40. I mentioned earlier about new local plans. Again, that's relevant to each partner. So again, it's just starting to add value to that similarity and shared opportunity. On slide 41, there's some input from our colleagues at PSPS in terms of what they could do extra for us. And then going through, I think from slide 44, we talk in detail about what each council is doing in those areas at the moment and doing well to present the opportunity of what the other partners could look to access and take advantage of. So, for example, under health, South Holland will say on slide 44 that they're really good at food safety. East Lindsey will say that their work around Magna Vitae is really important with health. But then again, on the Boston column, if you look at community work and community leadership, you know, that's an area I think Boston is perhaps providing the lead on and has the expertise in. So it's all about just putting a bit of that detail there. We then move on to scope of services, and on slide 47, we reference the partnership that we've already got and the partnership that South Holland have already had. So the councillors and officers are well versed in partnership working, and there are some other good examples on there as well. And then we have a whole host of slides which look at each of our service areas, what we refer to as the building blocks. So on slide 49, it's economic development. And then under each one, we talk about what the partnership potential is. So again, if one partner has got a good approach to supporting its market towns, why not roll that out across every market town in the partnership? And we spent a lot of time on this because I think some of the questions that came along earlier, which were about, will this work? What does it mean? What validity has it got? What confidence can we put in it? These are the slides which show that we've looked on a service by service basis, and we've actually said what some of the things are that we could do together. So there's some thought that's gone into the headline business case. I won't spend too long on those because they are multiple. They run all the way through Let me get this
I
right.
wonder, Rob, if we perhaps stop for a minute and ask if anybody's got any
Yeah,
questions.
if you want to go for any more
Is anybody in
questions, there,
questions
please
on
do.
this? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, Councillor Austin, off you go.
Right, one comment, one question. Okay. The
Well done.
comment is that obviously in a larger area, as we're talking about a much larger area, customer contact, we've got to be able to have people who do have some personal local knowledge. So that there is a challenge, obviously, if, say, someone answers a query relating to East Lindsey, but they're happening down in South Holland, then, you know, that it's a little bit different from someone answering in Boston when they know Boston backwards, you know, so that's a comment. My question, though, it just relates to something, and I keep on turning these pages over. It was page 49, that slide. What is vital and visible? Is that a sort of technical term for doing things, or what?
It's a branded piece of work that has originated in East Lindsey that has been developed with the Place Institute, and it's been used to engage the market towns to understand what's important to them, and then develop a piece of work about investing to deliver things that local people want. And I think it's seen as something that's operating really well and has gained a lot of praise in one area that could be applied to Boston Town Centre, to Spalding, and rolled out across the other areas.
Yeah. Councillor Anton Dunny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it's quite an interesting subject that Councillor Austin has mentioned now, and I'm very pleased to hear the answer, because we can work. Because lately, just in Boston, I've seen a lot of turnover of tourists. Believe it or not, people are from Scotland. This morning, I served people having coffees from Scotland, and they loved Boston. We need a good marketing for Boston. We need a good team to work for Boston, and I think for the other marketplaces. And I think we have the potential to increase our incomes from tourists. We have the potential to make the tourism a part of our success and our incomes in our businesses. And it's quite interesting to hear Rob talking about that. And I think if we have some experts in that field, I think we can achieve a lot. Thank you.
Do you want to comment, Rob?
No, I mean, I think, you know, we could spend hours working through these, but it's just helpful to see how much opportunity there is. So it's nice to hear from Councillor Dunny.
Okay. Councillor Tom Ashton.
Thank you. Again, you know, it's good to see the level of detail that's been gone into in preparing this report, in putting it together, in looking at the different service areas and the detail that has clearly been gone into. I mean, just off the top, one that I spotted and made a note of when I was going through here on page 30, South Holland District Council has a parish support, a community reserve loan scheme to support parish councils. I have no idea quite exactly what that involves, but it looked really exciting and interesting. I'd like to know more. But I think this is the key. As individual councillors on this council, or our colleagues on the other two councils, there will be every opportunity to look at what each other's doing, and if there's schemes that work and be shown to work that we can buy into and that we can share. But I think the key is taking that forward in a slow and calm and considered way, and picking those bits up as we go along. It's not we're rushing into everything at this stage and going to share everything across all three councils. It's a case of finding out what works and what will fit and where it will fit in. So I welcome the detail that's in here, and I hope that there is, as I'm sure there will be, inspiration for South Holland members of things that we're doing here.
It's nice to say a lot of effort has gone into this document. very little from me, I might add, but other colleagues have spent a lot of time trying to populate this. So I think some of our colleagues have done a really good job.
Of course, yes.
And on that basis, it's really good that your colleagues are already working on that level across each of the councils because it's not just us having eureka moments. I hope that they will be too.
I mean, just by, if we can follow that one up, Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
If colleagues would have a look at slide 68 for me, because this is one where I think the committee could add some value to the business case. Officers have done a lot of that work to identify what they feel their council is really good at and what they bring to the partnership. It stands out that we don't have a great deal in there from Boston at the moment, and I think we should. So what these slides 68 and 69 are designed to show is where those three partners feel that they are performing really strongly on. So just at the top line there, East Lindsey on culture, Boston on its heritage work, South Holland make reference to its housing. But that column feels a little light to me in terms of Boston. So if members have got anything that they feel that we should put in there, that would be a welcome addition.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Ashton, you want to come back on that, don't you?
I would say that if we're looking for one from Boston, I'd put the work and the successes that we've had locally on economic development, on attracting businesses to the area, on the partnership that we're establishing between the college and those businesses and schools and everything. I mean, I only chair planning, and I only see this from very much a side-on angle. But I very much get the impression that for a relatively small borough council, we are punching so far above our weight on economic development and those kind of links that we should be shouting it from the rooftops. And it's why I mentioned earlier when I did the opportunities that come with drawing together the strength of the three councils to push that agenda, because council, I mean, I appreciate I'm perhaps going on a little bit of a tangent here, but my impression is that councils for very many years saw their role as stopping things they didn't like, whereas actually reality of the 21st century is that there is very little tools that government has left us with to stop things, but what we do still have is the ability to facilitate, to help, and to encourage.
I would absolutely agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that. I think it's absolutely first rate. Rob, do you want to make a comment on that, or do you want to?
No, I think it's just a really helpful discussion. If we capture these, they are things that the committee can then feed into the final document. So I'm all ears at this stage, really.
Councillor Austin, you want to come back on that? Or you want to go further?
Right at the very, very early on, or, you know, really in the one of the early pages when I was going through this and making scruffy notes here and there, one of the things, well, there's two comments that I made to myself on the paper. One was that what is Boston bringing to the table? You know, what have we got to offer? But then also I thought to myself, well, there is quite a big difference between ourselves as a very small authority, certainly compared with East Lindsey, and perhaps South Holland is the sort of in-between one from the as regards the extremes. But of course, our population is certainly very much concentrated in the town of Boston, and a series of villages or settlements, to think of them as major settlements, and then a smaller number of minor settlements. But, you know, and we look around, well, it's Curtin, it's Swineshead, it's Sutterton, and similarly a little bit up going towards the north. But we have everywhere really in Boston. Borough is so close to Boston itself, compared especially with East Lindsey, or maybe with bits of South Holland, where Sutton something or other is a long way from Spalding, isn't it really? Therefore, we see economic development, but it does tend to be concentrated in that one area, pretty well in Boston or pretty close to Boston. And I think people might be tempted to say, well, what is actually going on? It doesn't look to be anything different from what it ever has been. But we know, I mean, I know from sitting on environment and economy that there is a lot going on, but, you know, there's a big industrial state and things keep on happening there, but most people don't know they're happening, you see, because it's not so in your face as what might be happening, say, in one of the prettier market towns within East Lindsey. So I don't know if you follow my drift. I think we're perhaps hiding from the public as a whole what really is on offer.
Comments, if you can. Yes. Rob.
I mean, it certainly capture that. It's often said that there's not a great deal of investment, but I think the amount of investment in Boston at the moment is surpassing anything that it's had in decades. So I think there are several points I picked up there from Councillor Austin. One is I think we do bring the urban part of the region quite strongly, don't we? Because we are the biggest urban centre in Boston, so that there is a strength there, and also that point around level of investment. It is a growing location, isn't it, Boston? Be it residential, industrial. So I think there are things that we could capture in there as what Boston brings to the table.
I'm just going to say one thing, is that we have a problem in the sense that when we talk about Boston, we're never quite sure whether that's a town or the borough. Whereas if it's in East Lindsey, we know that you're talking about Skegness, you know what it is. But when we talk about Boston, what do we mean about Boston? Is it the borough we're talking about? In which case it could be Wrangle, couldn't it? Or it could be any other place, Sutterton, for instance. Whereas when we talk about Boston, the town, if we can, that's the largest settlement by far. But I think that the economic production is right across the borough itself, not just in the town. It's the economic power of this area is in the farms across this area. But anyway, I've butted in too much, and I'm not an expert farming anyway. I'm a townie, so how dare I speak about farming? Yes, Councillor Austin, you want to come back?
Can I just supplement my comment? I'm very privileged, I think, to represent both the councils, if you like, that I'm involved with, Boston's main industrial estate. And it's not necessarily a pretty place, but there's an awful lot goes on there that people don't know about. And if we get a big company, say, going onto the Curtin distribution park, then it's much more visible, you see. And it is, or, you know, we announce very proudly that we've got Plant and Bean down on Newham and Beck Road. But there's industries going on that industrial estate that are perhaps quite specific. A lot of them engineering that is specifically related to the agriculture in this area. And when I did do an audit of that estate a few years ago, I was amazed. I had no idea what that company did or that company, you know, because they're not household names to most of us. So, you know, this is why I think the public at large just, or maybe a lot of our elected members, don't actually know what's on offer.
Councillor Tom Ashton. Oh, yes, right, Councillor. But I don't mind. Councillor Tom Ashton, you go first.
I think it is a very interesting and certainly relevant question of what is Boston, what we're talking about when we're talking about Boston. I don't think it's a question that we'll satisfactorily answer this evening, because I'd have to go home and bring you back some old maps. But simply, it is always going to be a much bigger and more interconnected area than the town itself. And this is something that I think the existing alliance with East Lindsey has begun to recognise, and I think certainly including South Holland aids with that as well. And the reason I say that is that already between Boston and East Lindsey, what has been done around housing and housing policy and housing lists and everything makes a great deal of sense, because as I made earlier, Boston Borough territory runs out in one direction, 2.5 miles from where we're sitting. And if you live in Frithville or Sibsey or Langrick or Anton Scout or any of those villages around there, what is your sense of place? Where do you identify with? Do you identify with the concept of East Lindsey? Or do you identify with your local town, which in our case, or certainly their case, is here in Boston? And in the same breath, we hear a lot of talk from time to time about the Food Valley, which I think is a very silly name. But we're not a valley, we're a fen or a marsh, and the boundaries on that blur significantly. But the concept of this area of South Holland and coming up to Boston, as it says in the report here, speaking of the extent to which South Holland has highly concentrated food production. Well, actually, Boston has quite a chunk itself. We also have the college, which I notice South Holland are referencing in these papers as, where do they see their corporate what are their corporate priorities? They're referencing Boston College up there, the University of Lincoln. They're referencing the Port of Boston, as a key component of them. I suppose as I ramble on, the only thing that I'm emphasising more than anything is the natural interconnectivity of the areas which the councils we're talking about and serving on cover, and the sense it makes and the tie-up that it makes. We've already, as I say, begun to solve a problem we created with the Boston Rural Sanitary District parks, which were in Lindsey, and they'd formed a rude. About 130 years ago. We've just got to keep on doing it.
Okay, thanks very much. Yes. Do you want to say something, Councillor Brown? It's all right. It's fine. I'm into off-the-cuff remarks. Right. I'm into off-the-cuff remarks. Thanks. Makes a better meeting. Now, Councillor Anton Denny, you've got a off-the-cuff remark. Or is it a real mark?
I'm off now. No, I just want to, because what I was going to talk about, because I was going to talk about the port. The Port of Boston has a long history to go. And really, when you read about the port, it's fascinating. It's very fascinating what this port and the role of the port playing in Boston and the areas around Boston. It doesn't matter East Lindsey or where you are, you will have to come to Boston. You could come from Coningsby, you come from Tattershall, you come to Boston to trade, you come to Boston to travel. The port was an essential thing. For me, the strategic point of the port and Boston, if the alliance works and the businesses go together and the services are performing, I think Boston could be the heart of a new revolution in building three-way alliances between three districts to go forward, because we have the port. It's the gateway to Europe. It's easy to use it. We have a lot of logistics around Spalding, Boston, I think South Holland. So we have the means, we have the tools. All we have to do is capitalize on them and use them properly. And I hope that the alliance will do that for us. And I think in Rob, we trust to build that kind of team, which will deliver to us this success. And we are craving for the success in Boston. It's about time that Boston will be recognized, and the area around Boston, which will have East Lindsey and will have the South Holland. And I think that will be great for us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Quite a responsibility there, Chief Executive. You want to make any comment or?
No, it's just really nice to hear that from councillors, and you know, to make this work, it's for all of us to buy into it really. So the staff that you've got, I think you've got some excellent staff, and we've got some excellent councillors. So I'm sure we can deliver on the ambition.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dave Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've also got to think, I'm very pleased that both Councillor Ashton and Councillor Danny mentioned the port. We've also got to think about what happens in the future with regards to our carbon footprint. I'm not going to babble on about the dock and its history, because I don't have my textbook here to quote things from. Certainly Boston Dock was, I think, the second largest, Tom, in the country at one time. And you also have to consider what is going on in South Holland with regards to food distribution. Now, a lot of the imported fruit lands in this country, travels up by road to Spalding to be. I'm not wrong there. I'm wrong there. I've done it myself. I know how it works. It lands in this country at Sheerness. It travels by road to Spalding. And that's where it's resorted out, repackaged and sent on to the supermarkets. The point I'm making is, with regards to our carbon footprint, we could probably expand on the docks, and probably that ship could land at Boston to distribute its imported fruit in Boston Dock. And that's another thing I think we should consider with regards to our carbon footprint. Thank you.
I think it might have to go to Immingham rather than Boston. Depends how big it is, isn't it, or Felix. So, anyway, yes, Councillor Austin, are you going to educate us?
First of all, I do apologise, but of course, I know that using the Port of Boston to import fruit, for instance, that instead of going to Calais, that can come up to Rotterdam and across to Boston, is in fact an ambition of one of the senior officers, isn't it? And yes, and this then would enable it to go direct to the place, yeah, well, not to the supermarkets from us, but from us to the places in South Holland that are then going to distribute it around the country. So I think this is surely, I think, something I hope is watch this space. And of course it ties up also, I think, with the hopes of a transport strategy, doesn't it? That, you know, we can't jump the gun. We're sort of poised almost, I feel, for these things to happen. And there's certainly a will, I'm sure, within our senior management that this will happen. And I would love to still be here to see it happen.
Well, we would hope you all be here. I'm not sure about Jeanette, yes? Yes, Jeanette?
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Noble has been indicating for a while, and I'm not sure if Councillor Wellborn wishes to speak as an observer. Thank you.
Councillor Wellborn. Sorry, didn't catch that. Judith Wellborn, yes. All right. All right, Jeanette, then invite Councillor Judith Wellborn to contribute. Now we have a 5-minute break, I think.
Councillor Noble is also indicating if you wanted to invite him instead.
Jeanette, was it Councillor Wellborn wishes to speak?
Councillor Wellborn was indicating earlier. I don't know if she still wishes to speak. Councillor Noble is indicating yes, Chairman.
Well, I think I would ask Councillor Wellborn if she wishes to speak. And yes. Jeanette, can you ask Councillor Wellborn if she's present?
I've asked her to come to the video, to turn on her video, so I'm presuming that she doesn't now wish to speak, but Councillor Noble's still indicating, Chairman.
Well, I'd really like to hear from Councillor Wellborn first. because Councillor Noble's already had one bite of the cherry over that way, or more than one. All right, Jeanette, if we can't raise Judith, right, or Judy, then we better go to Councillor Noble, haven't we?
Yes, Chairman, thank
Right,
you.
then bring Councillor Noble to the front. Yeah, there I can see him now. Right, Councillor Noble, come on, Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm just amazed that in that chart regarding external funding, there was such a big gap for Boston, because we've achieved a significant amount of central government funding in the last couple of years. I'll tell you now that the amount that the council received to give financial aid to local businesses is 30,730,000. Similarly, the council itself has received 2,220,000 since the start of the COVID stuff. We've had Section 31 monies for business rate relief amount of 5,311,000. We've got the 21 million from the town deal. We've got the money for the community champions, community cohesion grant of 495,000. So why is that there's such a gap for Boston? I don't understand it, because we have been very handsomely compensating and serve local businesses in the last 18 months, and obviously that's largely a result of officers working accessing this funding, but that there's plenty to put in that column.
Sorry, I didn't, was there a question there, or was that a statement, Councillor Noble? You have a
That
question?
was a statement, and querying
Right,
why
okay.
there's a big gap on the relevant section about external funding when the Boston section was blank, when we've had so much money for ourselves and for the local businesses.
If I can ask then, Rob, if you can answer, if there's a question there, can you answer it, please? And if it's a statement there, Rob, can you supply an alternative statement or an additional statement or something? Something, please.
Councillor Noble makes a really good point there. I think on slide 68, where we have a partner suggesting that one of their strengths is their success to bring in external funding. I think Councillor Noble makes a really good point that Boston should also make that claim. I think Councillor Noble mentioned a lot of areas there where we've been really successful. So we can certainly take that on as an extra comment that we put that down for Boston as well. That's a good suggestion.
Okay, that's fine. It'd be better if if Councillor Noble was in the room with us. I find that the connection we have with yourself is not as good as it could be.
Chair, I'd love to be there. I wasn't allowed. You were limited to the number of personnel you allowed in that Guildhall. So I would have gladly come, but I was told that was not possible. So that hence the video link.
I understand the situation. It's a great pity. So I understand the situation completely, though, but it's not satisfactory. It would be better for you to be in here. Then at least we can hear clearly what you're saying, because sometimes it just didn't fit. And I couldn't quite catch everything you were saying. So I apologise for that and look forward to receiving you in here sometime or elsewhere.
He looks better on TV.
You've just been insulted.
No offence taken, ex-mayor.
Councillor Brown, did you want to make a statement, or you weren't? Who else wishes to comment? Anybody? All right, Tom, and then I'll have to ask Rob to move on, because
I'll just very quickly going to speak in support of the comment that Councillor Brown and Austin were making, because the comment in respect to the port and transport strategy, I think just reinforce the point that I think is coming through all of this, that if we are able to make these points as three councils rather than as individual councils, I mean, there are elements of transport strategy and levelling up agenda and some of that strategic ambition which centre around the potential of the railway connecting the Boston and Sleaford line to the Spalding to Sleaford line, to give the Port of Boston far greater opportunities for freight, the A16, removing bottlenecks on the A16, some of which are outside of Boston, some of which are within the borough. These are all things where, if it is, as I think Rob encapsulated very, very well earlier, different chief executives going to the same meeting speaking for their council, where actually, if you've got one set of officers making a common case for benefits, for strategic improvement to benefit all of those councils, because certainly everything I've just discussed there has knock-on benefits for those bits of East Lindsey in the southern half of the district, for all of Boston, for all of South Holland. If you can get that into the mix, then all of a sudden we have a combination here in the East which has to be taken notice of.
I agree. Boundaries can be a real problem sometimes. If you have fewer boundaries, it's easier, I think, to plan. That's a personal view. Now, if anybody else wishes to, no, right?
Can I comment? We should put a custom service between the boundaries.
I'll make no more comments. Councillor Alan Bell, do you want to make a comment about anything?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah,
Get myself into trouble otherwise.
I'm all for this, definitely. My bone of contention is Boston. Talk to the people I got on the marketplace yesterday. Several people came to me pointing to Marks and Spencer's shop. What have we done to rejuvenate the town centre? And that's all I get, and I know you get as well. What are we doing for Boston and Boston's town centre? It needs to come into the 21st century. And this is what people are frightened, because nobody's coming into Boston. There's got no reason to come into Boston. They're going shopping at Spalding, dare I say Lincoln, and I don't like that word whatsoever. But this is a problem I've got, and the people out there have got. What's coming to Boston, and what can we do for Boston? Yeah, I'm all for all amalgamating, no problem with that, so long as Boston gets its share. Excuse
I may come in. I think the problem is that the businesses are moving to Wiverton Fen, next door to Tesco's. That's where Starbucks is opening up. So where McDonald's is opening up, and the other places that are around that area. B&M and so on moved into that area. And Aldridge, of course, it's become its own site. Unfortunately, things seem to have moved one way. And you just have to look at the traffic around that area. Sometimes it's absolutely gridlocked, you know, with cars. So it's a problem. What we do for the town centre, I don't know. We've got to do something. Oh, right, Councillor Austin. Thank you. Yeah.
I got a comment from an officer in Lincoln, I think it was last week. And she said, well, Boston's no different from Lincoln. Shops are shutting there, right, left and centre. And of course, we just have to make it known that Marks and Spencer's and those sort of buildings, we don't own them, do we?
No.
And, you know, you might say, well, what do the public want? The public wants something cheap and cheerful that they can wear for 3 weeks and throw away. And that's not going to, that you can't fund but from a market, a shop in the marketplace. And of course, the other option is we all do it, but I bet a lot of the people who complain, they shop online. Yes. And society has moved on from that traditional, you know, like the golden era and so on of the 50s. We've moved on from there. And this is why the high street, which in our place means the marketplace, of course, has to adapt. And this is what projects like PE21 and that recent one whose name I can't remember that we've just yes, well, that's a town fund, but then we've got this extra funding, haven't we? And I can't, yes, the levelling up one. But these are what we're trying to address by finding alternative uses within our marketplace. So that is what we are doing. I mean, if someone feels their neighbour's house isn't very attractive, what can we do about it? They can just as well go and say to their neighbour, I don't like the look of your house. I think, you know, you should do it up. But people have got to be realistic. What can we do to something that isn't in our control?
Well, Rob, do you want to answer, or do you want to make a comment on that? And then perhaps we can move on to the end part of the document presented. I think we need to maintain some progress, otherwise we will be here at midnight.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's still a few pages to go through, so it may be worthwhile if I
think move on. Yeah.
If I move on. I think we'd kind of reach slide 70, where we look at the financial opportunity. This section really cover. I won't speak to the slides directly, but in this area, we pick on some of the areas that we've touched on already, which is around the potential to deliver savings through the work opportunities. But also we record here what our budget gaps are from each of the council's budgets and medium-term financial plans. And the intention is to suggest that the partnership opportunities can help contribute towards those budget gaps that we've already agreed as councils. We go a little bit deeper here. We also talk again about the management structure and the very point that's just been raised really about the external funding that we've had a lot of success and we would hope in partnership to have more success on. So those financial slides move through to slide 76. And then we move on to section 6, which is around looking at the structure, which again, I think councillors have kind of beat me to it in many ways, talking about that expertise, talking about that resilience. And then we touched in the summary what you see on slide 80, which is that staffing structure. But then there's a number of slides that just give a bit more detail about how those services and portfolios could be grouped. So you've got the communities area on slide 81, the corporate on 82, growth on 83, and delivery on 84. So again, it's just about more detail. We then jump on to section 7 on slide 85. And this is really talking a bit about the 3 councils, really, about how they do business and the scrutiny processes. The cabinet members are mentioned on slide 89. So it puts a bit of local information that you'll all be familiar with, and it's really about recognising that we've got Councillor Noble as the finance portfolio holder for Boston, and we've got a finance portfolio holder for East Lindsey and South Holland. So it just brings everybody into this document. We then move on to section 8, where we're talking about the risks. And again, it's only right and proper that if we bring a proposal like this forward in a business case, the risks are understood and shared, so members are aware of those. But we also talk about the mitigation for those risks. So we have given some thoughts about how we manage those on slide 91. We've then talking at length about the dependency and the solutions to those. So we talk about technology, we talk about terms and conditions of the workforce, we talk about the branding of what we're looking to do. And again, everything isn't just left there hanging. It also talks about a solution, about how we bring it forward. And there's a degree of similarity here to the work that Council will have looked at in terms of PSPS, which Councillor Bell will obviously be more familiar than many of us on. We then go on to section 9 about governance and management. Again, we touched on a bit of this on the introduction. but clearly any partnership requires an oversight of groupings of members, be it a joint strategy board, be it joint scrutiny, being it officers involved in looking at the programme to be delivered. So there's a few slides there around governance, administration, roles and responsibilities, and that brings us to the end of the business case document. Chair, if there are any further questions.
Is it possible for someone to ring Councillor Julie Wellborn and ask her if she wants to make a comment? Because if she has a question, she hasn't been able to answer tonight. I don't like the idea of it's only being excluded from the meeting because of the process. So if someone can ring Julie Wellborn, and perhaps she can then ask questions if she's able. I can ask that question. I haven't got the means of asking any point, but
Chairman, if I may, please, while that's happening.
yes.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much, Alison.
That
Page,
right, page 134.
Oh,
I'll be very quick, Chairman. Page 134 and many other pages like that. That's printed far too small. I'm going to hope in hell of reading that.
And blue on white doesn't help, does it?
Eh?
Blue on white doesn't help. Councillor Wellborn, can you hear us?
Yes, good evening, Chair.
I apologise for not being able to bring you in earlier. Now, please carry on.
No, it's fine. Councillor Ashton actually covered the point I was going to make about Boston College and one or two other points, so I decided to lower my hand and gratefully let him carry on as he's part of the committee. But thank you for thinking of me. And I'm still here and I'm still listening. Just knocked down a question I need to ask at the moment, but thank you very much.
Well, if you do think of anything you want to say, then please make it clear to Jeanette. We'll get you back in, okay?
Thank you, I will, Chair.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Anton Dunny, I was rather remiss of not allowing you to come back. So, yes, please.
Thank you. That's fine. I just was going to comment about what Councillor Bell said and Councillor Austin about businesses in town. My answer to people, if we want to have a thriving business in town, that's up to our communities to basically contribute to the businesses. If we don't shop in our shops, they're going to close. If nobody comes to my cup, I'm going to close the cup, unfortunately. That's how it works. Business is like that. On the top of that, Councillor Austin has touched on it. Lincoln, Gap is going to close. B&H, it's closed. A lot of shopping malls are closing. Peterborough, the shopping mall in Peterborough, which is this very famous one, half of the premises are empty. So there is nothing. Only jewelry shops, Primark, and Tiki Maxx come in, and I think Foot Locker and things. So things are going that fast that people are buying online. This is the reality. All we can do is probably as a council is promote our local businesses and help them to work. If we go to them and buy from them, they're gonna survive, and that's probably for the future. Otherwise, I think there is nothing you can do to businesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me coming back.
Councillor Bell, because you've got
yeah, just thank you very much for that. Can you make sure you bring some of that council back to?
Can you put the light back? I don't think your light's switched off, so I presume you weren't live. You are now. Can you repeat that?
Can you
please?
make sure you bring some funds back?
Right. Okay. You've switched off again. Yes, Councillor Austin, are you alive? You are alive.
I'm alive. I think Councillor
I do
Ashton.
apologise.
I think Councillor Ashton will probably agree with me. It isn't usually the county council's money. They have to be able to get it from elsewhere, don't they? I assure you, the county just has money to keep its, we more senior people in age need more social care, etc. You see, and this is what money goes on. So, like us, they have to seek external funding. But there's a lot going on, and it's with regret that I've come off environment and economy scrutiny. But I didn't get too much choice this year. Let's put it like that.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. There is one point actually that I think I'd like a modification made to the paper. And there's page 100, and it's program board members should. And I think the second one down should be taken out. Do you see what I'm saying? Page 100, yeah. I'm not going to specify it in words, but I don't think that should be there because it's an assumption. Well, I would assume that will be always true. You get what I mean? And I think it's insulting actually to have that there. So you can perhaps have that modified and removed. That's my recommendation, as merely as a member of this panel, but I think it's important.
Yeah, so welcome feedback, Chairman. I mean, there'll be things in these documents which won't sit well with everyone, and that's the purpose of going through all three council scrutiny committees and member briefings, because we want to end up with something that everybody's comfortable with. So yeah, we can adjust that, Chairman.
Well, I wouldn't be comfortable about somebody outside reading that and making an assumption about what our officers actually do, and there's a slight there that has to come out. Well, I politely recommend that it's removed if that's possible. Now, anybody else any comments? You look as though you've got a comment in mind, Councillor Ashton. You have, yes, I thought so.
I suppose on a, I appreciate this may be a little bit too ambitious, but I would much prefer this whole thing to be called the East Lincolnshire Council Partnership rather than the South East Lincolnshire Council Partnership, because North East Lincolnshire is a relative, I appreciate it has unitary status, but it is quite a small little bit. And when you look, when you take all of the points of the compass, you think of East, then at the very least, well, you're looking at something that's between a quarter and a half, which actually, when you look at Lincolnshire, this is where we're probably hopefully going to end up. When you're thinking of a southeast or a northeast, you're thinking of about an eighth. But
I agree.
I am not going to die in the ditch on that one.
Right. Well, I will support that as a recommendation. That in fact we call ourselves, or we would go for, the East Lincolnshire Councils Partnership, because South doesn't really apply here unless you're thinking about South Holland, and we're not South Holland. So I would have said the East Lincolnshire. Yes, Councillor Austin, you're going to jump in and jump.
And of course, we did use the South East Lincolnshire when it was just the local plan between ourselves and South Holland, didn't we? And of course, we are not now talking the same. There are one or two possible typos. For instance, page 131 talks about the chairmanship of the joint committees alternates between the two councils at each meeting. I thought there were going to be three, just minor details like that. But, apologies, that's the teacher in me.
Well, yes, I fit into the same category, I'm afraid, yes. Yes, I must admit, I go through reports and start picking out things, spelling mistakes, etc. Not that I've been doing very much of it here. I think it's a well-written document. Anybody? I have one or two questions actually, if I own it. I think probably one was what do officers propose to achieve as a result of this? In other words, what are the key performance indicators that people seem to go for, and what kind of markers or KPIs would the general public understand as a success for this, new entity, basically? Because we're moving into a new entity structure, with three councils being represented by one administration, basically. Yeah. The public might wonder, well, what are they going to get out of it? But bluntly, so. You could say, well, it might be an increase in improvement in services. It might be, should say, a more cost-effective administration, that type of thing. They're easy to talk about. How do we sell this concept to the public? Because obviously we've got to sell the concept to the public. You've derived all this, and it's very interesting, and I'm in support of it. But how do I sell this to the residents of my area? That's the thing, and I suppose the idea of key performance indicators gives some idea of perhaps, we can measure out things. And I'm looking at my colleagues, well, my support next to me, Councillor Fisher. Oh no, did I say that? Maybe that's a Freudian slip because it's going to be that way. But perhaps Mr. Fisher, with your local knowledge and so on, will perhaps be able to help me in that. How would I perhaps be able to sell this to my local residents? If I can ask you that.
You can. I mean, that question may be better directed to the Chief Executive or the colleagues. But I mean, from my perspective, as part of the leadership and corporate management team, having read the entire detailed business case, what it shows to me is that the collective scope, capacity and ability of a three-way partnership brings an immeasurable amount of opportunity to the three local authorities.
Yeah.
Specifying it down to key performance indicators, I think, is difficult at this time because it's only the draft of business case until it's been approved. What will then become really important, as the Chief Executive has set out, is a three-phase model. So once we've gone from stabilising, it's actually then setting and defining, isn't it? And then in stage 3 particularly, that's where the ambition is. That's where the ambition is delivered, and that ambition needs to be shaped in partnership with the community, because that's what's important. This isn't about us as officers or you as councillors. This is about the communities that we all collectively serve.
I mean, I look at the risk side of things, and one of them picks out, isn't it, sovereignty. People might feel that they've lost sovereignty as well, or they've lost the identity. And Boston is it's not a peculiar place, but people here, they have a very clear identity of themselves. That's the one thing you do tend to notice, probably less so than if you live, say, in Stevenage or something like that. This place has a real identity, and it's important that we are able to show the residents that their identity is not lost by this, but it's actually strengthened by it. If we can reveal that this new structure actually strengthens their identity for the people where they live, and I think we're onto a winner. And that's perhaps what I'm thinking about. Maybe I've gone too far. Councillor Tom Ashton, sorry. It's the evening is drawing to a close.
I think you raise a very important point, Mr. Chairman, and I'm really pleased to see that on page, I think it's page 97 of the whole pack and page 91 of our of the draft document, is that fears of a takeover by one council, that lack of identity, that's picked up there very clearly in the risks, and it's good that we're identifying that. I think the safeguard in there is that we remain sovereign councils. And I think, and I scribbled somewhere earlier, that irrelevant to another part of the discussion, that one of the greatest risks to the success or otherwise of the partnership is the fact that it's made up of 3 sovereign councils. Each one of those, I read somewhere in here, there's 120 democratically elected members across those 3 councils. And those 3 councils, each of us are subject to elections every 4 years, which, if you're looking at where the risk is in this, then that is certainly it. But at the same time, it is also our greatest safeguard that is built into this. That, and it's in the comments on the joint strategy board, which bring together the cabinets of the councils. Those cabinets can come together and can discuss informally, but it's written, I think it's also spelt out in the memorandum of agreement, that does not become an agreement without the full support, without the support in full council of each of those 3 sovereign component councils. So the executive can agree with what they like, but it doesn't happen unless the democratically elected councillors of the 3 councils, each in their own councils, approve it. So which is, as I say, it's a strong safeguard. It also comes with a degree of risk further down the line. But I'm pleased to see that we're highlighting it there on page 91.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that's an excellent comment. It really summed up what I was trying to bring through. Thank you. Councillor Austin, did I detect you were going to say something? No?
You like Councillor Austin so much. You always ask.
Well, I have a problem. It's all right. I have a problem here. I sit in the wrong place. I would have eyes on either side. Be much better than him in front of me. It doesn't work very well. I've brought a bit of one end, really.
Chair, could I point out that Councillor Noble's got his hand up? I presume that's
all right. Okay.
Not a legacy one.
But we'll go for Councillor Noble. Councillor Noble, are you there?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Are you reading me loud and clear this time? Is that a yes or
You
no?
want to carry on?
Right. One observation and one question. I think Councillor Ashton was right about calling it the East Lincolnshire Councils Partnership. It's completely wrong to call it the South East Lincolnshire Partnership because it's not. It's for the whole of the East. The question is to Rob. Rob, there's nothing in the document about an exit strategy or option should one of the three councils become disillusioned and wish to exit the.
I thought there was.
Now, going back to when we first formed the strategic alliance with the East Lincolnshire Council, I recall we had a review period. It was after about 10 months. So is there a plan to put in some kind of exit strategy, excuse me, in case one of the three councils, if not, becomes disillusioned and wants to pull out and withdraw from the arrangement?
Yeah, if I can help with Councillor Noble's question. We do pick up on slide 93. The question is put, what is the exit strategy? So there is reference to that in the document, and then it refers the reader on to the memorandum of agreement, because as solid as any relationship is, there must always be a mechanism for exiting, and that is picked up in the memorandum of agreement. So there is thought to that, Councillor Noble, in the document, and I think it's a vital point, because if you're going into something, you have to have a sense of commitment to it, and this is big stuff, so there has to be that understanding and long-term commitment. But the reasons for leaving a partnership, as we spoke about earlier, between South Holland and Breckland, are often unforeseen. Yes. So there must always be that clause in the agreement. So that certainly has been picked up.
Page 116.
Thank you,
Termination
Rob.
review.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else anybody else wants to say or comment on it before I suppose we go for a recommendation, isn't it? There's a recommendation somewhere here. The recommendations that members review the draft business case, Appendix A, and draft memorandum agreement, Appendix B, and provide their findings and stroke recommendations for 1, inclusion as an appendix to the report to Council on the 2nd of August 2021, to inform the debate and ensure the governing documents are satisfactory to allow members to progress with the partnership, and also forwarding to those councils at Boston Borough Council and East Lincolnshire Council involved in the joint scrutiny exercise. They are the recommendations, as I understand it, on the report. Any comments on any of those? Am I right on those? Yes, Rob.
Yeah, Chairman, just to help councillors, because that could appear quite an unhelpful recommendation in terms of the timing of the work that we're doing. We will clearly have captured the whole conversation this evening. Yeah. So any observations that you've put forward in terms of what might be tweaked or changed or added to the document, as officers, we can go away from tonight's meeting, capture that on a schedule that we could then share with you at short notice and agree through the chairman as a way of doing that. But in addition, if there's any closing observations or comments that you would like us to pick up, then I'm sure the chairman would welcome those before we close the meeting.
Directly to you. Pass them directly to you. are you happy with the situation? Then we go to a recommendation. Is there anything else? Any other comments you want to make? Yes, Councillor Austin.
Presumably because this meeting has been recorded, any salient points that ought to be, you know, or recommendations can be passed on with that, can't they? You know, it's there somewhere in the ether, what we've said and what, you know, what our feelings are. So I think
yes,
you know, they can read or listen to our deliberations and we move on from there.
Councillor Bell, is there any comments to make? Nope. Councillor Austin, is that your final comment? Good. Right, Councillor Brown, any comments?
Well, I'd like to ask Alison Austin why she's brought a banana with her. But apart from that, no, I'm perfectly happy with the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Tom Ashton.
I think I have said quite enough for one evening. I would just thank you, Mr. Chairman, for facilitating what has been a really extensive debate, and I think we've teased out some interesting points in respect of the documents that we're discussing, and also touched upon really important broader points in respect of where Boston is in relation to the rest of the world, Lincolnshire and East Lincolnshire.
Well, thank you very much. The committee is only, well, the committee is everybody here. And without the support of members, it would be nothing, would it? So your support and your contributions make the committee successful. Councillor Judith Skinner, any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, thank you for facilitating this debate.
Oh.
I'm quite happy for the points and recommendations that we've made to be pulled together and circulated to the committee, and then through you, Chair, for them to be forwarded on for the 2nd of August.
Fine. I think it's probably best if they were circulated directly actually to Rob, really. If that's all right with members. If you have any particular comments, I would suggest you dispatch them straight to our Chief Executive Officer, to Rob. It's best that it goes directly to you, I think. If I do receive anything, I'll send it on. It's still better to send it direct to Rob. And then, yes, Councillor Danny. I haven't forgotten you yet.
I'm next to you.
Yes.
So far, it was very interesting. I think I'm very pleased to hear the answers from Rob, and I'm very pleased, you know, to be part of the debate. And I think Boston is in our hearts, and I think we should do our best for Boston. And that's how I think, that's my motto. But thank you very much for this evening. And if I may move the recommendations.
Thank you very much
indeed.
indeed.
I need a seconder.
Yes, it's better that somebody else.
Thank you.
Yes, please, thank you.
Happy to second. Happy to second, Councillor Dan.
So Councillor Danny proposes, Councillor Tom Ashton has seconded. Is that noted? Then we'll all vote on it. All those in favour of the recommendation? I think that's unanimous. Yeah. Excellent. Yes. Very, very good indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We now move on to the work programme. Okay. If I may. That's right then. Perhaps I'm going to ask Mr. Fisher here, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Indeed, at your last meeting, only just over a week ago, we went through the work programme, and as you can see, it reciprocated in front of you. The only real addition I've got is just to confirm for you, you've all had the invitation for the Community Governance Review for Tuesday the 19th of August. And then I'm awaiting, the invitation is going to United Lincolnshire Hospitals Trust on your instruction last time to invite the Chief Executive and any relevant members of staff, and that the committee, upon their acceptance, will submit a series of questions that it wants to add, and then we run through to November. If the committee has any further items to add, more than happy to make a note of those now. Alternatively, it's always there's always the opportunity for the committee to either contact myself or the Democratic Services team with anything that it wants to be put on for consideration at a formal meeting, so that you can collectively determine if it makes your programme.
Any comments, please? Yes, Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the 16th of September, we have the Pilgrim Hospital operating model. Can we probably bring something about COVID and how things are going in Boston and what's COVID-19, the pandemic? Yeah, if we can do that, that would be appreciated, just to have an idea how we are doing and performing probably in town. Thank you.
Yes, that's fine. I think I'm rather interested in also the CCG services, really. It's not just Pilgrim Hospital that concerns me. It's also the primary healthcare, the GP services. So we have one CCG now for Lincolnshire, and it would have been, I would be pleased to see somebody from that sector represented here, because it's not just ULHC that concerns me, but also the CCG services. And I don't know how members feel about that. Councillor Judith Skinner, yes, I know that.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that somebody will be at that meeting that can tell us what the knock-on effects are to our A&E facility at Pilgrim, because I believe there are concerns among the staffs and the community at Pilgrim that you're losing the urology facility at Pilgrim would have a knock-on effect on other A&E services. So I need to make sure that there is somebody there that can fully answer those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we said at the last meeting, we can invite whomever. Of course, it will be their decision when they come. But what I would probably suggest is that, as I did for the committee a couple of years ago, if we invite John Turner, the Chief Executive of the CCG as well, because clearly in terms of the delivery and commissioning, there are separate functions, but having a selection of chief officers from those organisations should enable all of the committee's questions to be put in one go and responded to.
And I think the paediatric services is one particular area. Oncology, that's an issue, of course. The emergency services are or the emergency operations are going to be transferred to Lincoln, at least that's the intention. The elective surgery would still continue at Boston, but but ULHT is saying it's not efficient to have emergency operations done at both Boston and Lincoln. Now, there's a consultation going on at the present minute, which probably you don't know anything about. I think, I don't know. It's not a very well publicized consultation. What they seem to be doing is to consulting the people who are inside the hospitals as to what they think. And the last time I heard, there was only 126 people being consulted. I have raised that point in the health scrutiny meeting, that their consultations need to be a great deal wider than just talk to people who happen to be on a bed somewhere in the hospital. They need to be much further outside to find out what people really think and what people want. And apparently they're also, it's on this week's, I don't know, these are attacks on motorbikes, isn't there? Dear, oh dear. It's, what I was going to say, I've lost track of that noise. There's two things on this week's, tomorrow's Health Scrutiny Committee meeting. One is involving the consultation with the public, basically. Communication, they are concerned about communication. Well, I think they need to be concerned about communication, but I don't think it's very good. And the other thing is, as I say, there's a consultation supposedly ends in a couple of days' time on whether or not it's appropriate to transfer the emergency oncology, to Lincoln. And there's a question mark about that. I've raised my concerns about it because the travelling between Butterwick, sorry, I hope I never heard that, did I? Butterwick, or Scrain End, shall we say, and Lincoln General, it could be a problem, particularly in winter. And I have said that if you have a serious, if it's an emergency, then down to Pilgrim is 10 minutes, but down to Lincoln General is an hour and 10 minutes. And I don't think you might survive on being bumped around in an ambulance from Scrain End down to Lincoln. And I don't think that's taken on board. And I just don't think that ULHT understands sufficiently well the location of this area and the type of roads we have to put up with. And I think that's something that needs just to be hammered on. And that's my soapbox for tonight, I think, really, is that I'm not happy about that. So, yes.
Sorry for butting in.
Please do.
I think their MO, their modus operandi, seems to be the same as it was for children's services. Try and put it under the radar. I quite agree that there's been, I actually was alerted by, I saw their questionnaire on Facebook, but I've contacted some of the people that I had contacts with when we were doing the children's services, and the staff at the hospital are extremely concerned, and I am trying to get some more information to formulate some questions to put to them, obviously to let them have them before they come to committee, so that they can fully answer my queries.
Thank you very much indeed. This is what we need to be as councillors. We need to be very active. We want to watch what's going on all the time, because things happen behind the scenes, you know, and consultation can be something that be done behind closed doors. So we need to be very careful. Otherwise, it would have a major effect on the people who live this area.
They use it as a tick box exercise, I think.
Right. Councillor Austin.
With the other scrutiny chairman sitting next door, but one to you, sorry, you know, nearly next to you, would this be an occasion for joint scrutiny again?
Well, I'm always happy to work with Judith all the time. You know, we work very close together, and as far as I'm concerned, we have one scrutiny. Effectively, we have two meetings, but effectively it's one scrutiny all the time. You know, that's the way it has to be. We work together. We have to defend this area. There are some people who perhaps are thinking of rationalising everything down to one hospital. We can't have that. There's one or two other issues one particular issue I can't talk about tonight on the air, if you say, but I'm dealing with at the present minute, which does involve a patient in our area, who I'm very concerned about, and the treatment she has received. I can't mention a name, I can't mention anything to do it, but it is before the executives at ULHG at this present minute. So we will have to see what transpires, because it affects everybody here. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. I've probably got enough. I've probably said too much anyway, haven't I? Right, going back to the work programme, one more minute and then we can go home, can't we, I suppose, actually?
Yes, so if members want to give some consideration for items from January onwards, and what would also be useful whilst it's fresh in your minds, if you've got thematic questions for CCG or ULH2, if you want to email those directly to me, then I'll start collating those now. And the earlier site that we can give them to our partners, then they can select who they would wish to come before you. And if you want it organised as a joint scrutiny committee, if you would be comfortable in keeping the date as the 16th, and then Chairman, you can invite through your co-chairman that joint scrutiny. We can select a venue that's COVID secure. So that will we can certainly explore.
I'm fine with that. I'll work with you, Judith, in any way you want on this.
Stephen, I'm quite happy to do a joint scrutiny on that. Yeah. I'm quite happy to do a joint scrutiny.
Yes, we'll work together on it. We've got to work together to protect this area and to protect the people here. We really do have to do that. The decisions have been made elsewhere, and they will affect all of us at some point. I'm going to close the meeting, if I may. Is that anybody else? Any comments? Any comments?
What time is it?
I don't know. Midnight, probably. Right. Well, I'm going to close this meeting. I thank you, and I thank the officers for their support, and I thank everybody else on the screen over there. And I'm going to say good night.
Right, Chairman, I'll end the stream on YouTube.
Thank you very much.